Chief, tell all the other parties out there with you to please come in. We're about to start. Today is Friday. We intend to do a sprint to make the most of the time so that hopefully we close in good time. Even when people go for prayer and return, we will not still take too long in this hall, hopefully. Doctor, I think that's what we're working around, right? Yes. Okay. So please take positions. Ah, a lot of people are still moving in this room. Okay. So we're continuing from where we stopped yesterday, and we're going to look at an overview of what we have been able to do from days ago up until now. And in the course of today's engagement, okay. And then in the course of today's engagement, we will be looking more keenly around social protection. Because if you've noticed, our conversation and dialogue yesterday had happened mostly around climate change. So we're going to be looking more closely at social protection today. And that is why we started the dialogue earlier, that I think have excited a lot of people in this room. And have also exposed the vulnerability of a particular gender now. So that said, yes, that's the men. Yes, they are not so vocal over their own concerns and matters. So that said, I will hand over the mic to Dr. Oke, and he will lead on the conversation from here.
All right, good morning, everybody. Um, Mine is just to guide us because yesterday I was so impressed. We came up with very interesting perspectives and views about climate change impact and the rest of them. And then it was also planned like that because if we had brought in issues about social protection and say let's start linking them, that yesterday probably wouldn't have achieved what we achieved. Now that we have that, we have also gone back to look at everything we got. Yesterday we said we should also update all our observations. Did we try to do that? By the groups. We tried to do that, right? Which is very, 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 very good. Please, if you have not done, please do it so that we can integrate it, right? Okay. So what we try to do again, because we're also going to focus today on trying to link these impacts to the shock responsive social protection. How does this impact we identified yesterday, all those things we talked about, how does it relate to what is the main issue, which is the social protection? And we understand that Kaduna State actually have a policy on social protection. I think that is true. Okay, they have a policy on social protection, and I also got information that is being reviewed now. So if we're able to also discuss the linkage between climate change, social protection, I think it's also going to help those that are going to review the social protection policy, right? So we are also doing the state a very big service. So going from there, I have also begged Oga Goje. He's going to do a little presentation about the social protection policies of Kaduna State, right? So that all of us will now understand how can we link most of these impacts to what? To the social protection issues. And then what manner of deliverables are we actually expecting when we go to engage with these communities, right? So what we also try to do, because today we want to see if we can actually conclude. So we have actually tried to see how we can structure the document itself. So that when we look at it, if all of us look at it and we feel that is fine, if it is not fine, if there is also other things we need to add on the structure before we start the marathon presentation and discussion and the rest of that. So let's present it now so that everybody will look at it. In the part one, we are proposing that we bring in introduction. Then after introduction, we bring in overview of the community engagement framework on climate change related shock responsive social protection, right? Then under the same part one, we talk about our goals and objectives. So let's just be looking at it and see if there is something that we are missing out in the structure, or if there's something we need to add or something we need to remove. So on the part two, because whatever we are doing in Kaduna State is actually derived from the national level, we are going to do like a situation review of Nigeria climate change policies. What are they? It's actually from here we are going to really identify the gap. Does Nigeria climate policy issues address this shock responsive protection? So if it does, so what are the issues? If it does address them, then is Kaduna State actually getting their fair share? If they are not getting their fair share, then what is the problem? Then we now come to Kaduna State in context. We now contextualize whatever we are doing. At this level, we are just going to look at the climate change impact in Kaduna State, policies, and what? Implementation. That's exactly what we are going to do in the number 2 of part 2. Then number 3, because everything we are doing is actually based because we want to, to extend, to respond to the shock being suffered by the vulnerable ones among us in the communities and the rest. We are going to look at the social protection response to the vulnerability as a result of climate change. And that is where the Kaduna State social protection policies will come in. So that's why we really have to understand the Kaduna State social protection policy. Then, number 4 of the part 2, we'll be looking at the climate change impact on social system by sector, which we did yesterday. Very beautiful. So we are just going to look at them by sector. Those things we identified yesterday, we now use it to populate here. So what are these impacts? What are the implications of this impact on the vulnerable? So when we look at the vulnerable, we also look at the gender, we look at the PLWD. So those that are living with disability. So how does this impact, affect them? What are the implications on these people? Then under the same part 2, we'll be looking at the cross-cutting issues. Governance is a cross-cutting issue. Whether it is agriculture, it is this, it is that, is a cross-cutting issue. So, and how we engage is also cross-cutting issue, right? How we engage. Are we going to do awareness? Are we going to do advocacy? Are we going to do that? The strategy we are going to use is also a cross-cutting issue. That is that for the part 3. Right. So for the part 4, part 3, that was part 2. For the part 3, because most of the things, the engagement we are looking at is directed at changing behaviors. Because most of the climate change, the causes, the impact, whatever, is all about a behavioral thing. So we will now be looking at the behavioral change milestones. What do we expect from the communities when we engage? How do we think they are going to respond to our engagement to change the way, probably the way they are now behaving, to a better, the way we want them to behave? So how do we measure it? What are the milestones we're expecting? Then after that, we'll now be looking at what are the key shock responsive social protection deliverables to the communities we are also expecting, based on the Kaduna State social protection policies and what strategies. So what are the key deliverables we are expecting? So those key deliverables will also guide us as we are moving to the communities to engage. So that when they're asking us, we can say, okay, we know that the state is doing this, the state will do that, the state will do this, or that. There is this. For instance, in the budget, there is the budget allocation for climate change this, for climate change that, Now, after that, we'll be looking at what will what will be our guiding principle where we are going to engage. What is the guiding principle? It's going to be community based. We are going to do a lot of trying to talk to people, trying to be smart, trying to be, guided by integrity and the rest of them. Now, the next one we are going to discuss under the part 3 will be monitoring, learning, and innovation. So how do we monitor? So what do we do with the monitoring outputs? Do we just get the monitoring data and we relax? Or do we get it and use it to learn to see how we can improve on what we are doing? Improving on what we are doing is what innovation is all about. So that's exactly what we are going to do there. The number 5 is about sustainability. We have this beautiful thing. We are going to engage. Kaduna State wants to engage. Is it just going to be after 1 year and it's gone? No. So what is our sustainability plan? So we really need to discuss that. So after that, we'll have our conclusion. So this is the structure of the document that we have been sitting, trying to see how we can come up with, that we are proposing anyway. So based on this, which is our proposal, if there's anyone you think should come in or anything you think we should remove, let's all of us brainstorm and see how we go about it. But if there is none, Goje will help us and then make some presentation on this the social protection policies of Kaduna State, so that it can help us to see how we link the social protection policies and the climate change impacts. So thank you so much while I wait feedback on this structure. Yeah. Yes, feedback.
Maybe you take it
To the beginning, right?
one.
Yes. That's it.
All of us have access to
Today is Friday and you have changed.
So, this silence means that you have done a fine job.
So go back.
Yes. So if you agree that he has done a fine job, clap for him. Now the other one was very reluctant. Uh-huh. Women should clap for him more. Okay, Goje. Let's have.
Okay, this is the cable.
No, bring. Oh, it's your.
Okay, you're going to. I thought I'll be using it from here.
Okay, I wanted to be at your service.
Okay, but you will still switch slides. Yeah?
Okay, it's all right then. Then let me.
All right.
Let me leave you with your work.
This one is.
So you just hold it because.
Welcome to Alibu.
Okay.
Line in.
Mm. Are we sure it's in the right input?
It is. What? Probably your computer is racist.
All right. Okay, this one is not even working. So, while I'm being punished by holding a mic that is not working, okay, that one is better.
So we have to transfer.
Okay. How do I do this now?
See, but this presentation is colorful. So I mean, it's an idea.
Roger,
Yes, that's what I'm just. All right. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. It is always exciting to share thoughts in meetings like this, and especially on issues that have to do with the largest portion of our population. Careful. And it is important that the drivers that push more people into poverty are addressed or nipped in the bud before it reaches the proportion that becomes a problem for all of us. And I think looking at the stakeholders that have been put together today and yesterday, all of us have come to one conclusion, that climate change is real, and more importantly, climate change is becoming like the biggest source of poverty and vulnerability. So it means that whatever plans, policies, programs, and even government budget should always have an eye on, one, not just mitigating the negative impact of climate change, but two, to ensure that we build the resilience of communities to be able to adapt to climate change. And that is why this presentation is very important. And I will quickly go through the slides just to give us an idea of why we are having this session. So my name is Yusuf Ishaku Goje. I'm from CALPET, Coalition of Associations for Leadership, Peace, Empowerment, and Development. Also a member of Kaduna Social Protection Accountability Coalition here in Kaduna. So many of us are aware that Kaduna has signed into the Open Government Partnership, which is Kaduna State government committing to being transparent, to being accountable, and also to be responsive to the citizens of Kaduna State. And one of the things that makes OGP unique, Open Government Partnership, is the principle of co-creation, where government has agreed to pull in the civil society, who are expected to be the representatives of the larger population of citizens, to set up a platform where they can co-create reforms that would ensure that government services meet the needs of the people. And one of the critical ways government carry out this co-creation process is in the development of the state action plan. And in the state action plan, there are commitments made by government that together with civil society, we would carry out these commitments in order to achieve the goal that government has set for itself. And one of the commitments in the State Action Plan 3 of Kaduna State is the commitment on strengthening social protection system. And in those commitments, you have a co-chair from government, which is the executive chairman, right, of Kaduna Social Protection Investment Katsipa Investment Program Agency, yes. And the other is represented by Sumaya, who is the co-chair for the civil society. And in their commitment, or in the commitment of the TWG on social protection, one of the milestones expected to be delivered is to develop a community engagement framework for climate change related shock responsive social protection. So what we are doing here is supporting Kaduna State as a whole to develop a framework that would enable government and other critical stakeholders to better respond to poor people, vulnerable people that have been impacted by climate change in terms of the social protection interventions in the state. So that is basically what we are doing here. So in 2020, the policy was developed and it was it was approved in 2021 by the previous administration. This process was supported by Save the Children. So the policy has an overarching dream, what it wants to achieve. Probably we'll change this from a dream to reality. We'll put it the overarching reality, because sometimes dreams don't come true. But we want this to come true so that the poor and vulnerable can really get to benefit. So for Kaduna State, government is saying that they want to see a Kaduna State where the poorest and most vulnerable residents are supported to live productive, fulfilling, and dignifying life. So, if this is the dream of Kaduna State, and we have identified collectively that one of the biggest contributors to poverty and vulnerability is climate change, then it means that our social protection policy should be biased to a large extent to climate change. Because if, for example, we use the instance that we usually use of the Lake Chad Basin, you find out that at the end of the day, currently they say about 90% of the Chad Basin has shrunk, right? So it's just like 10% now. And you have about 40 million people depending on it. So, and these people include pastoralists that will need water for their cattle and all of that. So what happened then is that Mr. Oke talked about it yesterday, where he talked about climate migration. They are now forced to travel to looking for areas where they will get pasture and water. And in the course of this movement, conflicts begin to occur. And when conflicts occur, it means that out of that conflict, people will leave their providers, family heads, right? People will lose their livelihoods. So it means that more people will still be thrown into poverty as well. So this is just to demonstrate to you that the rippling effect is very, very huge. And that is why it is important, just the way we have identified the other factors that are pushing people into poverty, that this dream that Kaduna State has is also designed or achieved in a way that it factors climate resilience. So, based on the data that is in the policy or was in the policy, because this policy is currently being reviewed, so some of the data might have changed. So, as of in terms of the population of Kaduna State, we saw that male, that is the male gender, are having up for 84.08% poor. So the male in Kaduna, 84.080% are poor in Kaduna State. For female, it is 85%. Then for employed and unemployed, I know during the policy review, Mr. His and others debated around this, but in terms of the employed in Kaduna State, 84% are said to be poor. And we did a calculation during the engagement. We say the globally accepted amount for measuring poverty is $2, right, per day. So if you pick a civil servant and break and you calculate, well, if we calculate $2, that's how much? Yeah, 3,000, 3,500, approaching 4,000. So how many, if you break down the salary of a civil servant, how many civil servants spend 3,000 if you break down their salary a day? How many of them earn up to 3,000? So you have, despite the fact that they are working, they have jobs, they are employed, but a lot of the employment we see is actually underemployment.
So say now we are all
No, except you, sir. No, except you, sir. But if you want to debate, sir, just give us your account balance, then we will assess. All right. So under unemployed, we have, okay, sorry, employed is 74%. Unemployed people are 84%. So this also raises concern, because the assumption is that when you're unemployed, you're poor. But there are people that are unemployed but are living good by virtue of family and other factors around them. Then urban is 81%, rural is 86%. So what this means is that in Kaduna State, female, unemployed, and rural people are the most vulnerable that any intervention should focus on. And these are some of the ways that the policy has measured that. So this is how the policy was developed. So I don't think I'll go into that. So as of the last policy, Kaduna State has its own definition of what social protection is, even though this would also change by the time the reviewed policy is finalized, because I remember that some of these definitions were also reviewed and to reflect current realities. So for Kaduna State, according to the policy, what social protection is that it is the totality of steps taken by government and other stakeholders to address the vulnerability of the poorest residents by mitigating their social and economic shocks. So one of the things that I know that from the conversation from yesterday has also brought out is the fact that climate impact is usually felt at the social and economic level. So this is very relevant that we have a community engagement framework that enables government to engage communities directly so that the social protection intervention will be tailored to the needs of these diverse groups that are usually categorized as poor and vulnerable. So this is just plenty grammar from the policy, but basically it reflects the state government commitment to inclusive governance that leaves no one behind, regardless of our diversity. And more importantly, it provides equal opportunity for residents to live productive and dignifying lives. So basically, this is the aim of the policy in Kaduna State. The first part is that government is saying that in all of our policies, programs, budgets, and services, that it should be able to cater for all the category of people in the society. Because sometimes we do budget analysis, policy analysis, you still find out that policies and budgets are still skewed to a certain category of people because we have the tendency to always generalize. And I'll give a quick instance. So for example, when we say persons with disability, we tend to group them. But we don't know that within the persons with disability, there's diversity within them. So the challenge of a woman, a female with disability is different from that of a male with disability. More so, a female with disability, just disability, has different challenges compared to a woman with disability that is pregnant. So these are factors that our policies should tend to cover rather than picking up this umbrella approach and say, oh, PWDs, we are giving you these slots. So sometimes, for example, if empowerment or livelihood support is being carried out, the thinking is, let's give persons with disability 5%. But we will not also look at even the persons with disability. The blind is there. You have the blind, you have the albino, you have the wheelchair, as they call themselves, and all. The sight impaired, visually impaired, sorry. Yes, not blind. So these diversities, every policy should be able to cater for all of these diversities as we have it. Yes, sir. Yes. Mm.
There are issues of those issues.
Yeah.
I'm just concerned. The data you showed
Yes.
on poverty level, you mentioned that even under unemployed, there are some that can be called that are not poor.
Mm.
My question is, let me go another example. I'm on a woman. Some may decide to say, the woman, so I'm going to go for the money. Another one will say, I help the man. And they do it, and they survive. I don't know what happens.
Yes. It's a typical example.
Are we beginning to see the need to not only look at government as the provider, as government as the only support towards mitigating this issue of poverty, And equally talking about making people do that, hey, you can depend on government. Because like I said, I said, through government must not be able to solve these problems. If the government cannot, what are we doing to make the poor realize that even without the government, they can survive? Let me end by giving an example. I never knew that farmers will actually make life easier for themselves until last year I harvested almost 400 bags of this. I was like, so it means I can actually make life out of farming, not necessarily on one other crops. So the question I'm asking somebody is, at that point where we are focusing our thoughts only on government and trying to awaken the awareness of the poor,
People.
to wake up their own survival.
Yes, so I would answer this question as me because I'm not part of the OGP technical working group. Just to say that if you look at the OGP work plan, the state action plan, what happens is that the government comes up with commitments. Then the civil society also have their commitment. So it's not only dependent on government. So there is a clear role that civil societies have committed themselves to actually doing. So that is how OGP is designed. It's not dependent on government. So that is why the biggest principle that makes OGP different from any reform system is that it is co-created. So co-creation in the sense that government is bringing something to the table, civil society is bringing something to the table towards achieving that commitment area. So for example, this particular component of the commitment area is driven by the citizen side to see how communities can also play a critical role in ensuring that not only that climate change is mitigated, but that we reduce the number of people that fall into poverty and vulnerability as a result of climate change, by ensuring that whatever interventions that are coming are tailored to their peculiar needs. So that is how it is designed. So it's not per se focused on government alone. Yes, sir. So the second part, like I said, is also looking at creating equal opportunities, which I might not need to pay much attention on. So, but basically, the next statement talks about that the interventions are pursued in an integrated, inclusive, and sustainable manner that optimizes resource utilization and achieves high impact. So, for this policy, you can't talk about sustainability, you can't talk about integrated approach without talking about climate change. And that is why it is relevant that this community engagement framework is there, so that whenever KATSIPA is doing any intervention, it is conscious that yes, most of the people that we are targeting as poor and vulnerable are poor and vulnerable because climate change happened to them. So, and already the framework recognizes the best approach to now reach out to this category of people through a bottom or up approach, and ensuring that the interventions are tailored to those category of people. So the policy has an implementation plan, although it has not been approved till date. And this policy is already being reviewed and the implementation plan has not been approved. And the last administration said it is because of the budgetary implication. The implementation plan came with budgetary costing, and it was running into hundreds of billions. And the government then said that they did not have the kind of fiscal space to capture that. But again, it is open for more debate in that direction. So it is based on this policy also that the KATSIPA law was established. And also the law, the policy also recommended the establishment of KATSIPA. Because one of the biggest challenges that happened to addressing issues of poverty and vulnerability in Kaduna then, or I don't know whether till now, is that most of the MDAs, ministries, departments, and agencies delivering social protection were doing it in silos. So Ministry of Health, their intervention is they are on their own doing it. Education, on those ones under agric, those ones under human services, everybody was just doing, and there was no system to help integrate all of this for government to be able to evaluate whether all of the interventions being carried out is either removing people from poverty or protecting the vulnerable from further falling into vulnerability or poverty. So the policy itself now decided to say, let's have an agency that would help integrate all of what all of these ministries, departments are doing, enhance better coordination in terms of who is supposed to do what and what each MDA is doing, how it is contributing to the overall goal and vision of this policy. So this is basically that. So it is built on a number of principles. One is issue of equity and resource relocation or distribution. Because if you do budget analysis, for example, one of the things you look out for is equity in the distribution of expenditure. So government might decide to do a budget of 1 trillion naira. But that 1 trillion naira, you might see that 70% of that money would be more beneficial to only a segment of the society. The other segment of the society will be left out. And it is not that government is doing it deliberately, but it's because nobody is putting an eye on how those monies are being distributed. So in the bilateral discussion, they will just say, allocate this to this, allocate this to that. Not these resources are distributed in an equitable manner so that the poor and vulnerable, who are usually excluded and forgotten, because we have systems, not just in Kaduna State, in Nigeria, where the poor and vulnerable are usually thought of as an afterthought. After all we finish, then we say, you've not factored in women. Youth, we will not put anything for youth. So they are not actually in the center of the distribution, discussion around the distribution of resources. Universal basic needs, that is one of the area that the policy is also looking at. Health is indispensable. Education is a universal need, and other areas of human capital. Principle of citizenship, human rights. Social protection is a human right issue. That is why those people that are more affected by climate change also have a right to be protected. It is their right to be protected. So that's what the social control and social inclusiveness. So I'll quickly round up. I know we don't have time. I'll just take the next 5 minutes to round up this session. So the social protection policy is built largely on 4 pillars, which is the approach that is being adopted to implement the social protection system in Kaduna State. So the first one, because you expect to have done 5 years or you're at least 60 years before you retire. So it's meant to cater for those category of people, because at that stage, you do not have the energy to go and live the kind of work that a 20 or a 30-year person can do. So at that point, you need some level of care as we have it. Then labor market is talking about mostly people that can work but cannot have, do not have the job opportunities or the financing to do what they do. So this supports them with labor market interventions. And mostly, if you remember, during the intervention by the last administration at the federal level, you hear things like public works, hand power and all of that. So for public works, you have the strength. So government will say, come and clean the drainages and we'll pay you for it. So those kind of interventions just to support. Social care is to ensure that at the community level, there are systems created that will help people to better enjoy or benefit from the interventions. And lastly, is talking about the laws, policies, and regulations in place. So this is what I just wanted to highlight. All these other ones are just the key interventions that are happening. But for our community engagement framework, like I said, this is where our biggest focus is. Because as long as the framework does not align with this, then it means that at the end of the day, the framework is going left, while the interventions around climate change in terms of building community resilience is also going in another direction. And this is something we need to pay attention to. I want us. And in this sector, that is 14% of the entire state budget as we have it. So, but the critical question for us would now be, out of this huge amount, how many are targeted at adaptation, which is where mostly this framework would play a critical role. So, if you look at it, this is not very clear, but I'll just speak about it. So, we looked at the budget classifications and we identified those budget line items that had to do with adaptation and the ministries, departments, and agencies. So with this framework now, it's easier for us to link communities to the social protection interventions that are climate change related. And that will help us better even track what government is spending in terms of ensuring that they build community resilience as it affects climate change, and how those social protection interventions would benefit our target populations. Because if not, the danger before us is huge. Climate change is becoming like the core, because conflicts arise from climate change, food insecurity is arising from climate change, and a lot of other displacements are happening because of climate change. So it also means that all the strategies we are doing must not just be on paperwork in terms of policy level and policy pronouncements, but can we begin to look at budgets, what government has actually committed, and what are the interventions, and how do we leverage this community framework to ensure that people are linked up to this intervention. So that's basically the purpose of this presentation. And thankfully, this is not clear. They don't know the color mix would be this bad. But if you look at this, in the budget of Kaduna State, you see exactly what government is spending on social protection. It's very clearly written there. You see what is going to be spent for old age. You see what is being spent for children and family. You see what's being spent for even social exclusion, then the social protection interventions. So all of this would help us better track. So thank you for allowing me to bore you people with this session. And so this is how we want social protection to make everybody feel like. So this one looks like somebody.
That one
in
was
this
when
one.
you were small. That one the pace now.
No, I agree with this one. But this one that does not have height, who is it? Can you suggest?
That one is admin.
All right. All right. So thank you very much. We hope that this will help. The purpose of this is just to help us in our conversation while around the framework development, so that we are able to clearly link the issues, so that we don't, because usually we do frameworks and they are hanging somewhere. You can't connect them to the real systems and the processes in the state, but we want to see how this can be done a bit differently. So thank you very much for your time. Augusta.
All right, let's give Coach another round of applause.
Now you know good too. Them no good.
Okay, no, Coach.
So Oga has been my mentor since 2012. Since when I was in Abuja, and he has built my capacity. So yeah, so he calls me good. You're welcome. Yes, sir. Yeah, well, thank you. Yes, sir. Thank you. Oh, I thought it's part of the palliative.
That picture of those kids, last Friday was Gloria.
Do we need? But another person. Okay.
That's okay. We have a question for Goje, right? Goje, come.
All right. Thank you.
It's not the nakedness part. No, 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 no. We are protecting. We are not exposing. So you're socially protected. So I think that's just.
Okay. I think the message is that when you see, I think I attended one seminar workshop somewhere, and we are talking about poverty. And people were now, when they see this, when you see this picture, everybody will be like pity. You see this family is very poor, this family is this. But when you get inside the house, or look at the child, or look at the mother, you see happiness. Then he begins to ask the question, so what does poverty really mean? You understand? So how do you really define the poverty? Is it when the little child is not putting on the best clothes or the rest of them? So it's just the joy, is also to make everybody happy. So when we are talking about the social protection, is also to make sure that they are not victims of those vulnerabilities, and those vulnerabilities that does not consume them. So I think those are the things. What I would have wanted us to do again, Danjuma, can we share this thing, that the narrative that we try to do?
From yes, the laptop is right here.
We can share it, but before that, on the structure that we try to project, I also got some very, very good suggestion on how we can improve on it. Somebody is actually telling us that we can try to come up with a very good community engagement strategies, being specific with illustration and pictorial on maybe workshop, awareness, sensitivity, and the rest of them. And then we should also look at adaptation measures in that framework. That we should also look at sustainable practices. And there is one that actually caught my very good attention, is about disaster preparedness. Because most of these communities, when we are talking about resilience, you really need to prepare for disaster. I know that Kaduna State have been suffering flooding, which is also in every other state. So how do we, and most people that are affected in those communities are actually these vulnerable groups that we are trying to protect. So how do we really engage them on when it comes to disaster preparedness? So which I think is very, very good. So they also talked about issue about cash transfer. Yes, I don't know if it is part of Kaduna State social protection policy. Even though I have my reservation about cash transfer and the rest of them in the design anyway. Mm. So implementing it, okay. Okay. So they also talked about food security issues. I think all those things have actually been captured in most of these things we are showing. Yes, the presentation of yesterday. So what I am actually thinking for us to really move on is that we can share what we have here, so that what we are supposed to update, which we want every group to update, if they can help us to update it. So by the time we update it, we know that we already have everybody's, the input is complete, but then there is something that is also missing. The one Goje just told us now, we really need to find a space on how to discuss it, either in a group or whatever how we are going to do it, because we have to fill that space. Okay. 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 So on these key deliverables for social protection of the vulnerable to climate change, I think this suggestion, which my sister actually gave, will be very key here. So we really need to brainstorm on this area to find what are the key deliverables we are expecting. So let's go. So that when we are sharing now, we believe that everybody will update and then we can come up with something. Then we will now say we have done. Then on this very place, who is to be engaged, probably we might just change it to stakeholder mapping, right? That's what I'm thinking anyway. But when all of us will have to make input, and let's see, because it's a collective something we are doing. Then who is the affected is the vulnerable. Those are the focus, the people we really want to protect, right? So we'll feed that in. So let's go. Okay, the community engagement strategy, yes. So I already have something here that we can also use to brainstorm. So there are a lot of them. So let's go up again. So talk about, so that we do it before everybody will begin to, no, just go. Our work is almost done. So those are the things we really need. So basically the data we have here, we just share it. Every group should update based on the observations yesterday, and then brainstorm on all these ones. And I think we already have our framework. Hmm?
So we are going to have another template.
Do we have another template?
We need a template so that we don't have maybe.
Okay, so that we don't send out this. Okay, no problem. We'll do the template.
So we can break up now.
Yes. Yes. So before we come back.
Hold on until when?
You want to check back? So let me do the template, right? Then we can share. So thank you so much. It's been a very good one. Mm.
So we also have this one. I want to just make.
Okay, make clarification.
Good morning, all. I still remain Umar Abubakar Mohammed, Social Welfare Officer from Ministry of Human Service. Regarding the functional cash transfer that they just raised an issue that is federal government doing the transfer. We at the ministry, we did the exercise. That was Ministry of Human Services engaged in conditional cash transfer for Almajiri children. That is during past administration. Those that we captured, because I'm part of the data chip that we captured Almajiri children in various local governments. So we screened them and shortlisted them, and the ministry uh, did the exercise by sending money to those that were shortlisted for 6 months, 10,000 every month. So that during the past administration. Thank you.
No. Those in charge of it. We also have this part.
The introduction part.
Yeah.
Okay, the introduction part. I will have the introduction part. The overview of this one. Everybody that have been following this framework can actually tell us now the overview, but we'll do that. Then I also think at the end of the day we should say this document can be reviewed after 5 years, after 6 years, so that you have a timeline, right? I don't tangible evidences. Okay, she's suggesting 5 years.
I think I want to go the other way.
Okay.
Not that it's not correct, but things evolve so quickly these days. And for instance, Trump just pulled out. It just went on. So a lot of things come up in a short space. And the review we're talking about, if there is no need for review, there will just be a call just look at the document again. If it's okay, we adopt it and we move on. So, but because of government inefficiencies, if we have a text, maybe like 3 years, and there is no need for any changes, for instance, there could just be a call for conference. Just take a look at it and adopt it.
And move on.
But if you give too much space, so many things will change and you'll not be able to capture them. Because some people put up argument that it's not time for review. Document also should be living documents.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
it
I'll
is.
come back again. That when you have such a document, I believe you are supposed to do like yearly
Appraisal or
like yearly operational plans,
plan.
something like that.
Yes.
So such types of nuances should be captured in the yearly,
Operational.
because the objectives might not change, but when you decide the activities to carry out to achieve those objectives, you'll be using, based on current realities, what you think should be done for this year. So in such, we'll be able to capture those things, but then holistically, when the review comes, it's not looking at the nitty-gritty activity, or looking at the goal, the objective, and any other things.
Maybe I should quite inform me. At the on the part of the legislators, I know for Kaduna State, unless it has changed, normally policies are reviewed after 4 years, ordinarily 4 years. But like Madam said, there could be a need for it to be looked into even before the 4 years. So maybe if she's saying 5 and he's saying maybe
3.
5 is on the high side, do we look at the 4?
4.
Yeah, do we look at the 4?
I should give you back.
No.
Oh, yeah, try.
I think I want to agree with almost everybody. Everybody has some very good justifications for, whatever suggestions they are making. But at least let's go by the standard of doing things and not what we want. I know that at times feels there might not be funding or an organization that can take it up. But it's something that at least from our own, we're talking about funding in this community engagement framework, which speaks about some of the local resource, mobilization or something. I think it came up yesterday. I think amongst us, there are people that are still passionate also. We can come together and see how we can pull on that. At times, a document might be 3 years, but you find out that it's not repeated till after maybe 4 or 5 years. And so I think I want to also go with the 4 years. That was what I wanted to suggest as well, so that we strike a balance.
Okay. So maybe we'll try 4 years, but we'll just do the template so that everybody can come up with what he thinks, right? Okay. So on this funding thing, is a serious thing, but I think even before now, we have been talking about public, that's multi-stakeholder partnerships, where we try not just to have only the government in the room, we have the CSOs, we also have private sector. So how can we bring the private sector? Because that is the most difficult thing to do. How can we convince the private sector? So we have to speak to what motivates them. So it's also something we should be thinking. How do we bring the private sector in?
So it sounds like an all-inclusive, like the whole of society, everybody putting hands together. So the body language is changing. Some of these organizations that we have, their corporate offices are probably in Lagos. I just came in from Lagos 4 yesterday, and I had one or two meetings. So say, for example, some of these banks are part of their corporate social responsibility are channeled towards environmental issues right now. So at times again, with our advocacy, which we have pointed out, can also help to shape in the private sector to begin to think towards supporting issues like this for those that don't.
So you can see.
So in addition to what she says, in the document, is there advocacy strategy as well?
Working?
Advocacy strategy.
Advocacy, yes. Yeah.
Looking at how to
Convince. That is almost ready. Let me do the template so that we share. Because today everybody will go to mosque, right? Okay. So thank you so much.
Okay. Gode, I was hoping that there will be questions for you. There is none. So you confused everybody.
That was the goal.
Okay.